The arrival of Zara. Liam stood outside his modest cabin in the small, sleepy town of Virana, taking in the crisp evening air. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the distant hills. It was the kind of quiet town where everyone knew everyone's name, where life moved at a pace that allowed for time to think, time to breathe. But lately, that sense of peace had started to feel more like a burden. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that would change everything. His thoughts were interrupted by the sharp, low hum of an engine. It wasn't any vehicle he recognized. The sound grew louder and closer, sending a chill through his spine. As a mechanic, Liam had worked on many machines, but this one was different, too smooth, too otherworldly. He turned toward the source of the noise, squinting as a streak of silver light flashed through the sky. He didn't have time to react before the ground trembled beneath his feet. A violent, thunderous crash echoed across the forest surrounding the town, followed by a blinding flash of light. The air tasted like electricity, and a strange sensation tingled in his fingertips. He rushed toward the noise, his curiosity outweighing the common sense to stay away from whatever it was that had just fallen from the sky. It didn't take long for Liam to reach the clearing. As he pushed through the thick foliage, he saw it, a twisted wreckage of metal still smoking from its descent. It looked like something straight out of a science fiction novel, a spacecraft of some kind. His breath caught in his throat as the realization hit him. This wasn't a simple crash. This was something far beyond anything he could comprehend. Liam's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. But his feet moved without thinking, carrying him closer to the wreckage. He needed to see what or who had caused this. As he stepped cautiously toward the wreck, a weak, raspy voice called out. "Help, please." Liam froze. The voice wasn't human, not by a long shot. It was high-pitched, almost melodic, yet filled with desperation. He hesitated, but something pulled at him, an instinct he couldn't explain. He made his way toward the sound, his eyes scanning the wreckage for any signs of life. And then he saw her. Crouched among the twisted metal, an alien woman lay motionless, her form strikingly beautiful and otherworldly. She had metallic blue skin that shimmered in the fading light, and her hair appeared to be made of strands of liquid silver that floated around her face as if caught in a breeze that wasn't there. Her eyes, large and luminous, glowed softly in the darkness. She looked fragile, her limbs contorted unnaturally from the crash, but there was an undeniable strength to her presence. Liam's first instinct was to run. She wasn't human. She wasn't from this world. She could be dangerous. But as she looked up at him with those glowing eyes, something stopped him. The fear that had gripped him only moments ago seemed to melt away, replaced by something he couldn't quite place, a sense of empathy, of responsibility. She whispered again, "Please, help me." Liam's mind was torn. The town would never accept her. They would panic, start throwing stones or worse, but this wasn't just some random alien. This was a person in need, a person who had fallen from the sky and needed help. He knew what the right thing to do was, even if it didn't make sense. He kneeled beside her, his hands shaking as he gently touched her arm. "My name's Liam," he said quietly, trying to offer comfort, though he wasn't sure how to comfort someone like her. "I'll help you, I promise." The alien girl blinked, and her eyes flickered with what Liam could only describe as a mixture of relief and exhaustion. She struggled to sit up, her body trembling as if every movement caused her pain. "I'm Zara," she said softly, her voice barely audible. I didn't mean to come here, my ship. It was attacked. I don't know where I am." Liam felt his heart ache for her. She was clearly disoriented and scared. He glanced around, wondering what had brought her to Earth, what dangers she might be running from. But the truth was, he didn't know the first thing about alien species or space travel. All he knew was that he couldn't leave her here, alone in the wreckage. "Zara," he said, helping her to her feet. "We need to get you somewhere safe. The town. They won't understand and they might try to hurt you." Zara's eyes widened slightly, her gaze darting to the edge of the clearing where faint lights from the town flickered in the distance. She seemed to realize the danger they were both in. "I'll follow you," she whispered, her voice steady despite her fear. "But you mustn't let them know, not yet." Liam nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility that was now on his shoulders. He had no idea what was going to happen next, but one thing was certain. He was going to protect Zara, no matter the cost. As they carefully made their way through the forest toward his cabin, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. He had no idea what Zara's arrival meant for the future, or the kind of challenges they would face together, but he was determined to help her find a way to survive on this planet. no matter how dangerous it might become. Little did he know, this was just the first step in a journey that would change both of their lives forever. Hunted by the mob. The night was darker than usual, the air thick with the tension of secrets. Liam's cabin was located on the edge of Virena, far enough from the center of town that few people ever made the trek up to see him. He wasn't a social man, more comfortable with machines than people. But tonight, as he helped Zara into his home, that distance felt like a fragile barrier between them and a world that was suddenly filled with hostility. Zara's eyes were wide, scanning every corner of the cabin with both wonder and suspicion. Her luminous skin reflected the dim light of the fire crackling in the hearth, casting strange shadows across the room. She looked so out of place in the rustic wooden cabin, as if she had fallen through a rift in space and time. And yet there was an undeniable connection between them, something deeper than simple survival. Liam led her to the small sofa in the corner of the room, still reeling from the fact that his life had just been irrevocably changed. He glanced out the window, trying to make sense of what had happened. He knew that helping Zara was dangerous, but the overwhelming desire to protect her drowned out any rational thoughts. "Do you think they'll come after us?" Zara's voice broke into his thoughts. Liam turned to find her staring at the floor, her fingers nervously playing with the hem of her tattered clothes. She had been through so much, crash landing on a foreign planet, being chased by unknown enemies, and now depending on someone she had just met for survival. "They'll come," Liam said softly. "The people in town. They won't just let it go. Fear makes people do terrible things." Zara nodded but didn't respond. Instead, she stood up slowly, walking over to the window to peer outside. Liam could see her eyes scanning the darkened street below, her heightened senses alert to every movement in the night. Her alien nature, once so foreign, was starting to seem almost natural to him. He knew she was right to be concerned. In a small town like Virena, things like this didn't stay quiet for long. People would gossip, the news would spread, and soon the fear and paranoia would reach a boiling point. Sheriff Marshall was a man of the law, but he had a reputation for overreacting to the unknown, especially when it came to aliens. Liam's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. His heart skipped a beat. He wasn't expecting company, especially not in the dead of night. He hesitated, his gaze locking with Zara. She gave him a sharp nod, and Liam took a deep breath before moving toward the door. As he opened it, his stomach churned at the sight of the sheriff standing on the porch, his face grim and filled with determination. "Liam," Marshall said, his voice tight, "we need to talk." Liam's pulse quickened. He knew the sheriff wasn't here for a friendly chat. He stepped aside, allowing Marshall to enter but keeping his distance. The tension was palpable. "I've got a few questions about something strange that happened tonight," Marshall said, his eyes narrowing as he glanced past Liam into the cabin. "It's about the crash. You didn't happen to see anything unusual, did you?" Liam's mind raced. He couldn't afford to slip up. He had to play this carefully. "I was out working on my truck, Sheriff," Liam replied, trying to sound casual. "Heard the noise, but I didn't see anything. Figured it was just another storm." Marshall didn't seem convinced, but he didn't push the matter further. Instead, he turned his focus to the larger picture. "I'll be blunt, Liam," he continued. "The town's scared, people are talking, something's not right. You wouldn't happen to know what's really going on, would you?" Liam swallowed hard. He knew he was walking a fine line, and one wrong word could end everything. He didn't dare mention Zara, but the way Marshall was looking at him made Liam uneasy. There was a hidden agenda beneath the surface, a quiet accusation he could sense but not yet prove. "No, Sheriff," Liam said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I don't know anything, just a crash. Could be a meteorite, who knows?" Marshall seemed to study him for a moment, his eyes narrowing. Liam felt his heart pound in his chest as the sheriff's gaze shifted toward the door. Just before he turned to leave, Marshall spoke again. "Keep your head down, Liam. People are scared, and when people are scared, they do things they'll regret. I'd hate to see you caught up in something you don't understand." Liam's gut twisted. He wasn't sure if Marshall was warning him or threatening him. Either way, the sheriff was on the hunt for answers, and he wasn't going to stop until he found them. As the door closed behind Marshall, Liam let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Zara was standing by the window again, watching as the sheriff's car drove away into the night. "That didn't go well," she said quietly, turning to face him. Liam nodded, the weight of the situation settling over him. "I don't trust him. He knows something going on, and if he's got a team looking for you, things are going to get worse before they get better. Zara's eyes flickered with something between fear and determination. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said, her voice small. I just wanted to find a safe place, a place where I wouldn't be hunted. Liam stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. You don't need to apologize, you didn't ask for this, but now I'm here and I'm going to make sure they don't get you. Zara gave him a soft smile, her blue skin glowing under the dim light. Thank you, Liam, you don't know what this means to me. Just then they both heard the faint sound of footsteps outside the cabin. Liam's heart dropped. He rushed to the window and peered out, his eyes scanning the shadows. There, at the edge of the clearing, he saw figures moving toward the cabin. They're coming, he said under his breath. Zara's eyes widened in panic. They found us. Liam turned toward her, determination setting in his features. We need to leave, now. He grabbed a few essentials, a bag, some food, and a flashlight before pulling Zara toward the back door. They had to get out of there before the mob arrived, but it was too late. The faint sound of voices could already be heard, growing louder with each passing second. Liam, came a voice from outside. We know you're in there, we saw her, the alien, you can't hide her forever. Liam's heart raced. The mob had arrived and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. His cabin was no longer a sanctuary. It was the last place Zara could be safe. We have to go, Liam said, urgency in his voice. Zara nodded and together they slipped into the woods, disappearing into the night. The hunt had begun. The hidden safe house. Liam's heart thudded in his chest as he and Zara pushed through the thick underbrush, the sounds of the mob's voices growing louder behind them. Every snap of a twig beneath their feet felt like a warning, but they couldn't afford to stop. The town was closing in, and the fear of what might happen to Zara if they were caught loomed over them. They had to get out of sight. Liam, Zara gasped, her breathing heavy. Where are we going? They're coming closer. I know, Liam said, gritting his teeth. He glanced over his shoulder and saw flashlights cutting through the trees, the mob now spread out in search of them. The town had no mercy when it came to the unknown, and there was no telling how far they would go to get what they wanted. I have a place, an old hunting cabin. It's isolated, hidden. No one will find us there. He could feel Zara's gaze on him, her alien eyes searching his face for the truth in his words. Her trust in him, even after everything, was something he wasn't sure he deserved, but he knew he had to get her to safety. They had no other choice. The path through the forest was narrow and treacherous, and with every passing minute the search seemed to be drawing closer. As the trees thickened and the light from the flashlights faded behind them, Liam felt a slight sense of relief, but it was short-lived. The real challenge lay ahead. I'll keep an eye out, Zara said, her voice quiet but sharp. She stopped walking for a moment and turned, scanning the shadows. Her senses were heightened. She could hear and see things that Liam could only guess at. It was a strange comfort to have someone who could sense danger before it arrived, but it also made the threat feel more immediate, more real. Stay close, Liam murmured, pulling her forward as they continued down the narrow trail. We're almost there. Minutes later, they reached a small clearing, and Liam's pace slowed. Hidden behind a thick wall of trees and brush, there was an old wooden cabin. It had once belonged to his grandfather, a place where Liam would go to escape the chaos of the world. Now, it was the only safe place he could think of to hide Zara and himself from the people who would do anything to capture her. Liam moved quickly, pulling open the rusted door and ushering Zara inside. He locked it behind them, breathing heavily from the sprint. Zara stepped inside cautiously, her eyes flicking to the corners of the room. It wasn't much, just a single room with a fireplace, a few old chairs, and a small cot in the corner, but it would have to do. It was miles away from civilization, a place where no one would expect them to be. Are you sure this is safe? Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Only place I could think of, Liam said, moving to the window to check if anyone had followed them. I'll make sure they don't find us here, but you should rest. You've been through a lot. Zara nodded, her shoulders slumping as the adrenaline of running began to wear off. She walked over to the cot and sat down, her alien skin glowing softly in the dim light of the cabin. It was hard for Liam to imagine what she had been through. She was so far from home, so far from anything she knew, and now she was stuck on a planet that feared her. He moved to the fireplace, starting a small fire to provide some warmth and light. The wind howled outside, rattling the old windows, but inside there was a strange stillness. It was the first time in hours that Liam felt a glimmer of calm. "I never wanted this," Zara said after a long silence, her voice distant. "I never wanted to bring harm to anyone. I didn't even know where I was going when I left my world. I just wanted to survive, to escape. But now, I've put you in danger." Liam glanced at her, seeing the pain in her eyes. Her words cut deeper than he expected. "You didn't ask for this, Zara. You didn't bring the danger here. You just ended up here, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you." Zara met his gaze, her luminous eyes filled with something Liam couldn't quite describe. Gratitude, maybe, or maybe something deeper. They didn't speak again for a while, both lost in their thoughts. But eventually, Liam's mind began to race with the reality of what they were facing. They couldn't stay hidden forever. The mob would come looking for them. The sheriff would be involved. And worse, there were people out there who might want Zara for reasons they didn't yet understand. "I don't know how long we can stay here," Liam said, breaking the silence. "We'll need to figure out what to do next. I'm not going to let anyone take you, but we need a plan." Zara nodded slowly. I have some knowledge. My people, they can communicate across galaxies. I might be able to contact them. They could help." Liam raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "You mean you can call for help?" Zara's lips parted in a soft smile, but it quickly faded. "It's not that simple. My ship was damaged in the attack. I don't have the resources to contact my people without a stable signal. But I think if we find the right place, I might be able to fix it. I just need time." Time, that was the one thing Liam didn't have. But he couldn't let Zara go alone. He wouldn't. He'd seen the way she trusted him, and he couldn't let her down. "We'll figure it out," Liam said, his voice filled with determination. "But we need to stay low. If anyone comes looking for you, we need to be ready." Zara gave him a small nod. "I trust you." The words settled heavily in the air between them. They didn't need to say anything more. They both knew the stakes. The hunt for Zara was only just beginning, and the people of Virana were not going to stop until they had answers that could tear their world apart. As the fire crackled in the hearth, Liam and Zara sat in silence, the weight of the future pressing down on them. They didn't know what the next day would bring or how they would survive the coming storm. But they knew one thing: together they had a chance. And Liam would do everything in his power to make sure Zara didn't face this fight alone. Betrayal in the shadows. The days blurred together as Liam and Zara remained holed up in the old cabin. The outside world felt miles away, even though they both knew that it was drawing nearer with every passing hour. The mob had not yet found them, but the atmosphere was thick with unease. The cold, biting wind howled through the cracks in the walls, and the fire that flickered in the hearth seemed to offer little warmth against the growing tension. Zara's presence, though calming in some ways, also kept Liam on edge. He found himself watching the window more often than he ever had before, his mind racing with possibilities. The sheriff hadn't come back since the night of the confrontation, but that didn't mean he was done investigating. In fact, it only made Liam more certain that the sheriff was playing a game of cat and mouse. And Liam knew, deep down, that he wasn't the only one who had noticed Zara. As days passed, Liam and Zara worked together to come up with a plan to get her out of there. Zara's idea of contacting her people was still their best hope, but the more she explained, the more Liam realized how complicated and dangerous it would be. The communication devices from her world had been damaged in the crash, and with no way to power them, it would take months to repair the necessary equipment. That was assuming they had the time, and assuming no one found them first. The cabin had become their prison, and the only escape Liam could think of was running far away from Virana where people would stop asking questions. But even that seemed impossible now. Zara had explained her situation in bits and pieces, but there was so much she still kept hidden. Liam knew she was holding something back, though he wasn't sure what. But as time went on, something about her story didn't sit right with him. One evening, as Liam sat by the fire sharpening a knife, Zara stood at the window, peering out into the darkening night. Her silhouette against the orange glow from the fire was hauntingly beautiful, but Liam could see the tension in her posture. She wasn't just looking for trouble, she was waiting for something. "What is it?" Liam asked, his voice low. Zara turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. "I can hear them," she said, almost to herself. "They're getting closer." Liam's heart skipped a beat. The footsteps in the distance. Was it the mob or someone else? He stood up quickly, grabbing his jacket and moving toward the door. "Who's coming?" Before Zara could answer, a knock came at the door. Liam froze, the sound sharp in the silence of the cabin. His first instinct was to hide, but it was already too late. Whoever was on the other side had heard them. "Stay here," Liam whispered urgently to Zara, his hand already on the doorknob. He motioned for her to stay out of sight. She hesitated for a moment, her gaze flicking toward him, but nodded in agreement. Liam opened the door just a crack enough to peer outside. Standing on the other side was a tall figure, cloaked in a dark jacket with the hood pulled over their head. The person's face was shadowed, but there was something familiar about them. "I didn't think I'd find you here," a deep voice said, laced with both anger and relief. Liam's stomach sank. He recognized the voice instantly. It was Marshall, the sheriff. "What do you want?" Liam asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Marshall didn't answer right away, and Liam could hear him shifting his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I need your help. This is bigger than just you, Liam." Liam narrowed his eyes. This didn't feel right. "What are you talking about?" Marshall hesitated, then glanced over his shoulder as if checking for someone. "It's about the alien. I know you're hiding her. I can't let that happen." Liam's heart pounded in his chest, and his grip on the door tightened. "You can't just come here and—" "I'm not here to cause trouble, not yet," Marshall interrupted, his voice low. "But the town is scared. They don't understand what they're dealing with, and I don't either. But we need answers, Liam, and if you're involved in this, you need to tell me what's really going on." The sheriff's words rang with authority, but there was something in his voice that made Liam uneasy. It wasn't just fear, it was desperation. Marshall was on edge, and that could mean anything. "I don't know anything," Liam said, trying to sound calm. "You're barking up the wrong tree." Marshall's eyes narrowed, but his voice softened. "I don't want to make this harder on you, but I need your help. They're looking for answers, and if they find her before we do, things will get much worse. I don't want blood on my hands, Liam. I'm giving you a choice. Either you help me, or you'll be dragged into it when the truth comes out." Liam could hear the pressure in Marshall's words. This wasn't just about an alien girl anymore. It was about control, power, and the fear that gripped the town. And Liam could tell Marshall was torn between doing the right thing and saving his own skin. "I'm not helping you," Liam replied firmly, standing his ground. "You don't understand. I don't care what the town thinks. I'm protecting her." Marshall's face hardened at those words. "You don't get it, do you? You think you're helping her by keeping her hidden. This town is on the brink of hysteria. They want blood, and if you keep protecting her, you'll be the one who's blamed when everything falls apart." Liam's resolve wavered for a brief moment, but his gaze hardened as he looked Marshall in the eye. "I'm not going to let anyone hurt her. Not now, not ever." Marshall's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he turned and walked away without another word, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. Liam closed the door slowly, his body tense. He could feel his pulse racing in his ears. What the hell had just happened? Marshall's words echoed in his mind, the threat hanging in the air like a storm cloud. He turned to find Zara standing at the far end of the cabin, her eyes wide with fear. She had overheard the entire conversation. "What did he say?" Zara asked softly, her voice trembling. "He wants me to help him," Liam replied, his voice tight. "He's trying to get us both caught up in this mess." Zara took a step forward, her face pale. "I don't want anyone else to get hurt because of me. This isn't your fight, Liam. You don't have to protect me." Liam walked over to her, taking her hands in his. "It's already my fight. You're not in this alone. I'll make sure you're safe. We're in this together." But even as he said the words, doubt began to creep in. Marshall's warning, the pressure from the town, it was all weighing on him. He didn't know how much longer he could protect Zara. And more importantly, he didn't know how much longer they could hide from the storm that was coming. The final stand. The night seemed to stretch on forever, with the wind howling through the trees outside and the flickering light of the fire casting shadows across the cabin. Liam sat at the small table, his hands pressed to his face, trying to wrap his mind around the whirlwind of events that had brought him to this point. Marshall's words echoed in his ears, but they no longer held the same weight. He couldn't allow fear to cloud his judgment. He made a promise to protect Zara, and that was what mattered. Zara stood by the window, her fingers lightly tracing the glass. Her alien eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, were fixed on something in the distance, though what she saw, Liam had no idea. But he could sense the unease radiating from her. She wasn't just worried about herself anymore, she was worried about him too. "Liam," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't hide forever. They're going to keep looking for us, and Marshall. I'm afraid he's not the only one searching." Liam stood up slowly, his gaze never leaving her. "I know," he replied quietly. "But we have to keep moving. We can't stay here anymore. Marshall knows where we are now, and if he's involved, there's a bigger threat than just the mob coming for you. We can't trust anyone in this town anymore." Zara's face hardened, and for the first time, Liam saw the true depth of her fear. It wasn't just about the humans anymore. It was about everything, her past, her people, and the future she didn't want to face. "I didn't want to drag you into this," Zara said, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't deserve any of this." Liam moved to her side and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You didn't drag me into anything. I chose this. I chose to protect you, and I'm not going to stop now, no matter what happens." She looked up at him, her alien eyes shimmering in the firelight. For a moment, it felt like everything in the world had narrowed down to just the two of them, standing in this cabin, surrounded by the threat of the unknown. But in that moment, he knew something important. He wasn't just fighting for her anymore. He was fighting for himself, for them. A loud crash shattered the silence, followed by the sound of footsteps crunching through the snow outside. Liam's heart leapt in his chest. He rushed to the window and peered outside. There, just beyond the clearing, were several figures moving through the trees, their flashlights flickering in the darkness. The search party had arrived. "They're here," he said, his voice cold with realization. Zara's gaze sharpened, and she moved quickly to the door. "We don't have much time." Liam grabbed her arm. "We're not running anymore. We need to face this head-on." Zara hesitated, looking at him as if weighing his words. Finally, she nodded. "You're right. We can't keep running, but we'll need a plan." Liam's mind raced. There wasn't much they could do, but they had to make sure they were prepared for whatever was coming. The cabin was a trap, and no matter how much he wanted to protect Zara, he knew there was a very real chance they wouldn't make it out unscathed. "We'll make our stand here," Liam said, determination settling over him. "We'll set up a perimeter. If they want to find us, they'll have to get through us." Zara's lips curled into a small, uncertain smile. "You're braver than you look." Liam returned her smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I've got a lot to fight for now." The two of them worked quickly. Liam gathered what supplies they had, old weapons, a few makeshift traps, and a couple of knives he had kept hidden for emergencies. Zara, surprisingly, had her own set of skills that Liam hadn't fully realized until now. She showed him how to set up basic energy fields, nothing sophisticated, but enough to slow down any intruders. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. By the time the first group of searchers made their way through the trees and neared the cabin, Liam and Zara were ready. The wind picked up, howling around them as the first beams of flashlight cut through the night. The sounds of voices, gruff, hushed, and tense, filtered through the walls. "We know you're in there," one of the men called, his voice thick with frustration. "There's nowhere to run, alien." Liam clenched his fists and looked at Zara. "Get ready," he whispered. Zara nodded, her face set in a determined expression. It was clear that the fear she had once felt was now replaced with resolve. She wasn't going to let anyone harm her or the man who had chosen to protect her. The first flashlight beam cut through the door's crack, and Liam's heart skipped a beat. They were almost there. As the door creaked open, Liam made his move. He lunged forward, slamming the door against the first man's face, knocking him back into the snow with a grunt. Before they could react, Zara activated a burst of energy from her hands, sending a wave of force that sent the others stumbling back. One man, his face twisted in fury, reached for his gun, but Zara was faster. With a swift movement, she threw a small energy pulse at his weapon, disarming him instantly. "Stay back," Liam shouted, his voice hoarse. "You don't know what you're dealing with." But the group of men wasn't backing down. They continued to advance, pushing toward the door, their steps heavy in the snow. The air around them crackled with tension, and Liam could feel the ground beneath him tremble as Zara's powers began to grow stronger, more refined with each passing second. Zara turned to Liam, her expression calm despite the chaos. "We can't do this alone. We need to escape." Liam nodded, his mind racing. This was it. There was no more hiding, no more running. They had to get out of here and find a way to end this before it consumed them both. "Get to the back door," he said. "I'll hold them off." Zara didn't hesitate. She dashed to the rear of the cabin, while Liam faced the approaching mob, ready for what came next. The door groaned as the men forced it open, flooding into the cabin with weapons raised. And then the first shot rang out.